Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And we're going to talk now about Star Trek Picard and the finale episode. I think it was titled Et in Arcadia Ego, Part 2. The second installment of following on from last week's episode. So just in general, I think this was certainly an action-packed episode. There's certainly a lot going on. Primarily what you would want from a season finale. You know, I've always felt a season finale should be that kind of epic, all balls out episode, you know, where we get a culmination of what's gone on in the season and then we maybe get a setup or cliffhanger going into the next season and getting us invested of what promising story arcs they've got going forward on here. So there was definitely a lot going on here. You know, they definitely packed a lot into it. It was full of kind of effects and battles, and it really went for lots of dramatic moments and emotional moments on there. Some of which worked, some of which didn't. There were particular scenes, particularly near the end, I thought worked really well, but there were other developments throughout that really, again, had a really rushed view, and it kind of got really chaotic and frenetic near the end. You had characters kind of popping out of anywhere with no real explanation or reason of how they got here, and everything was being thrown at you at such a quick pace. You didn't really have time to settle in and think about things and digest what was going on. They kind of want you to just roll with it a lot. And if I wanted to give a kind of statement, this was kind of like a 2 hour action-packed sci-fi movie crammed into like a 50-minute episode, right? They just put so much into it, and you know, when you have things rattling at such a pace and you don't really have time to settle in and just take in what's going on, you kind of lose interest, and you kind of just time out, and you kind of just kind of roll your eyes at certain moments, and you get a point where you're not really invested in such going on, and you just let the episode itself play out itself from there. And it just felt a bit weightless and a bit emotionless near the end, and there were constant events happening throughout this episode, and maybe typical of the season, where you're just always questioning what's going on. Why is that happening here? Why is that character doing this? How did this character enter here? You know, and you shouldn't really be doing that when you watch an episode or a film. You should always be able to kind of understand what's going on and just get involved more in the kind of jeopardy and tension and the suspense that's set in the finale on this. So yeah, it was a very rushed, chaotic and action-packed episode. Some moments were good, but I think other moments were just a bit too all over the place. So that's my quick non-spoiler review, if you like. So I'm going to go a bit more into spoiler for details now. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, you probably want to switch off now, watch the episode, and then come back and watch the rest of this review, because I'm going to go try into the chronological events of the episode as it unfolded on here. So as we know, we picked up from the events of last week, where essentially Picard was taken hostage because they went to the planet of the synths, and they're basically warning them of the impending Romulan attack. We saw at the end of that episode the fleet of Romulans coming towards their planet, and they were convincing them to, you know, prepare themselves. And it actually turned out that the Simps make this kind of really last minute decision that they were the ones that wanted to dominate. And we learned that there was this kind of super level of synth race out there, and they were going to signal them to come over and take and beat the Romulans, and then eventually take on all kind of organic life. You know, that's not what Picard wanted, and this was kind of fulfilling the prophecy that Soji is the destroyer. She's the person who's going to end up leading the events to the destroying of all organic life, all race within the universe. So that's where we were kind of stuck on this. So we picked up and we saw Picard in hostage. We see him in conversation with Gerard the Doctor, and in the beginning it seems like again she's kind of turned and she's working with the Simps now, and you know, she's got kind of some sort of redemptive arc that she's setting herself because of how she killed Maddox previously. We get conversations with Elnor and Seven of Nine. Seven of Nine just reflected, if you remember, they kind of took over the Borg cube, and it kind of crash landed on the planet, and the Borgs had kind of taken over and they were repairing it, and Elnor was still there with Seven of Nine. We then get other conversations with Raffi and Rios. They're trying to rebuild the spaceship, and he re-energizes it all, gets the spaceship back up and running. We also see later on, we see Naruk and I think it's Nerissa. I think I'm getting these names right. They have another conversation on there, and yeah, she basically asks whether he had sex with any more of his simps, because as we know, he had this um, kind of casual relationship with Soji or Dorj at the time in the earlier episodes on here. So that was the first query I had, is that where did Nerissa come from? If you go back and watch the previous episodes, when Seven of Nine had integrated herself with the Borg, right? The Borg soldiers had come over and they were kind of taking the cube back over. If you remember, Nerissa kind of got ambushed by several Borgs, and she was on the floor and they were kind of crowding over her. And we saw her blast out, but you thought it was just her getting like a phaser or stunner. She was just trying to shoot her way out of it, right? But I assume she's dead, right? Or she got captured. So when she just appears out of nowhere and she's back to normal, she's just back in a normal stage. You think, well, where did you come from? Like, how did you defeat those Borgs? There was like 5, 6 of them all on top of you, wrestling you down to the ground. How did you get out of that situation? I originally thought it was maybe a copy and it was being used to kind of trap Narek. That I was waiting for that kind of switch, but it never came forward. It was actually her, and she basically wanted to get the weapon system online for the Borg. Again, I don't know how she's going to do that on her own when we assume the Borg has been reclaimed by Seven of Nine and other Borg drones around her. Again, it wasn't really clear how many people were still in that thing. Was it only a handful, or was it loads of people throughout the cube? We saw previously when the cube, it has all these little devices and drones refixing it and repairing it as such. So we assume again it was more under the control of, if you like, Seven of Nine. So you're telling me that Nerissa is just on her own, out and about, no one's tracked her down. So again, that was one of the first of many moments of a character just appearing out of nowhere, and you're thinking, how did you get to where you got to, right? So we move on, and again, another change was Narek himself. He's kind of had this change of heart or change of motivation now, where he kind of wants to work with the heroes now. He's been against them all episode, as we know, all season. He's been working with Nerissa, this whole plot, to undercover within Starfleet and take over the Simps as well. Now he's changed his mind all of a sudden. It was really out of the blue, and we see him now reuniting later on with Rios and Raffi. He's chucking the rocks at the ship. They don't initially trust him, but then he makes a quick speech and they kind of let him in more. And yeah, this is the kind of beginning part where everyone's just all of a sudden just teaming up together, despite being at odds throughout the whole season. They're now just teaming up with him. They completely trust him now. Again, it just didn't really follow through. You needed a bit more work on that, to convince me that, all of a sudden everybody's just teaming up. We had a scene later on when Elnor, again, he just come out of nowhere, right, into the cube, and he came on his own. Like, he spent all this time with Seven of Nine. He makes a remark, "Oh, I miss you. That's why I'm staying around." But then he comes to the to the spaceship on his own. Like, where was Seven of Nine? Why did she hang back? What was she doing, right? Why didn't she come with him? So he just comes on his own, and he sees Narek, and then he threatens him. And they're like, "No, we're all friends now. We need to establish our plan, our initiative going forward." So again, that was another, really kind of just head scratching moment. Like, he went all that way on his own. What prompted him to do that? One minute he's just chilling out with Seven and Nine, then all of a sudden he needs to go back to the spaceship, right? Just didn't really make a lot of sense to me on this. So we get this team together, and then we get this huge exposition, and I think this is something that's a flaw not only with this episode, but I think the season overall, where Narek is given this huge exposition about the supposed legend of the Gamadan. I think it's the Gamadan, where there were kind of two twin sisters, and they were known as these demons, if you like, and they brought about this reign of terror and this 1,000 days of pain and suffering, and that's why we've got to stop them. He's come to this realization that's what this danger is. We kind of got this funny back and forth when Rios and Raffi assume they know everything, and he says, "Do you know about this? Do you know about that? Do you know about that?" And then they're kind of like, "No, we don't." And then that was a bit funny on there, but yeah, it was just this really kind of 3-4 minute scene where he's just giving you all this explanation, but it's coming at such a quick pace, And again, you're just kind of rolling your eyes. You're thinking, what is this about? It's almost as if he's making it up on the fly as he goes along. And they've done this previous times in the season. I remember a couple of episodes ago when we were back on the ship, and they were basically explaining the whole events of how the stars, or the sun, brought together twin stars together, or twin planets together as one. And this is whole the origin of how the kind of big master race wanted to warn people about the synthetic beings, and this led to the Romulans going on their big quest to kind of defeat them, right? And it was really just this whole expositionary scene. Everybody's talking, all these cuts and angles and such, and you're just not invested in it because they're just throwing everything at you, and there's no proper build up to what you're telling me. Why is it happening? How is it happening? They just expect you to roll along with it. So I was kind of really timing out of this whole scene. I didn't really get invested to it because I just basically knew they had to stop the Romulans and the big threat that was coming. I didn't really need this extra kind of mythological tale of how things begun in the past, right? So again, that was just another. It's done that a lot in the season. I'll comment it more in the season review of this, but it does that a lot. It just throws all this information at you and just expects you to just adjust to it and take it all in. And like I said, it doesn't land. It doesn't stick. So I just brushed over the kind of mythological tale he was telling on because things were just moving at such a fast pace. So we see the fleet of Romulans and Commander O, and she's got this massive fleet of Romulan ships behind you, and I thought visually that looked really good. I actually like some of the designs of the Romulan ships. We kind of got this great shot of the fleet and it's kind of lights kind of flashing from them as it comes through. I think the effects on this show were very good, and that was a very good effects shot on there. So we move forward again to, they decide now they need to kind of infiltrate the synth base. So they pretend they've captured Narek, and Rios, we see he's storing the grenades in the football. And this is another kind of flaw that they do in the show. It's basically when characters have a plan, right? We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. The standard 101 storytelling is you get the characters together, they speak their plan, you kind of listen to what they're going to do and how they're going to organize it, right? And then you tell it more linearly when you see the plan carry out. And then you see whether everything they've tried to do actually happens, and you get certain moments when this could go wrong here or that could go wrong here, or you're on the edge of your seat because if this doesn't happen, then they won't be able to initiate the next part of their plan. But what Star Trek Picard does, and this is typical a lot of modern day filmmaking, is as they tell the plan, they show it happening. So they cut back, right, we're going to do this, and then they cut quick to this stage happening. Then they cut back to, right, we're going to do this part of the plan. Then they cut forward to this plan happening. So it was just back and forth, and you're just losing the kind of trail of the events playing out, right? Because you want to get invested into what they're doing, but they keep cutting back to how they're doing it, right? And this is just a quick kind of shortcut way of storytelling, right? This is, it's a cheap kind of gimmick where you're trying to shorten time, and instead of going on and following through the actual execution of the plan, again, this is something that could have been maybe half an episode or maybe an entire episode, right? Of just watching them actually infiltrate and the synth base and try and get things back on side. But no, we just cut back, cut forward, cut backward, cut forward. They did this, I remember, back in the second episode when I think Picard with his Romulan carers, they were kind of investigating what happened to Soji. I think she was Dorj back then, what happened to her in her apartment. And they were talking about what they were doing, and they would cut to her apartment, come back, cut back to her apartment again. And it's just a bit disorientating as a viewer, right? Like, where are we now? Why are we going back and forth, all these different angles, popping up all over the place? So I didn't really like that. But okay, they infiltrate his plan, and they come forward, and they try and infiltrate the base and stop people on there. So we go on to the next part, and then we have it where they're trying to power the beacon and get ready for the super simps to come over. And then we have the Sianj character who's been kind of initiating this kind of simp takeover, and then when he's recalibrating one of the simps who, if you remember the previous episode, got stabbed by Narek in the eye because Soji wanted to instigate the conflict, right? So she knew she had to release Narek, get him to assumingly bring the Romulans over. That would then instigate their conflict so they could destroy everybody, right? So when he's watching the tape, he realizes, oh, that Soji was the person who killed this synth. So that's convinced him now that maybe Soji isn't the person she thought she was. So when Soji is making this big speech and she gets everybody together, he comes out and he just disarms her, right? And again, this really undercut the kind of menace of Soji, who in the previous episode you kind of felt was quite a formidable force. She had a really kind of presumably strong aura about her. You know, this was someone who you thought learns all the languages. You know, a very controversial moment how she learned how the Vulcan mind meld, right? So you'd think this character is quite a force to be reckoned with, right? But no, he just comes in there, flicks a switch, and just drops her down, and that's it. There's no recovering. There's no kind of, you know, her coming back later on. That's it. She's just dropped, just like that. So any kind of menace or aura within this character is just done, just like that. So you're like, oh, okay. She wasn't that special after all then. You know, they gave this indication she was kind of like the top synth or the most powerful synth amongst the group. But no, he just downs her just like that. So they carry on and we get this again where Soji is realizing that you know what's going on, and she's trying to activate the beacon, and I think Rios tries to throw the football with the grenade. She throws it up in the air, it explodes as such. So yeah, again they kind of found that, and this is back and forth in trying to get her to stop powering the beacon on there. So we move forward again, and we get to one moment. I'm not going to lie, this is one moment I was quite looking forward to. In the previous episodes before, I kind of predicted they were going to do this, but it kind of ruined it a bit when I thought Narisa died in the previous episode. But we get forward here and we have the kind of fight between Seven of Nine and Narisa, you know, two of the most hot and attractive females in the show. You know, I was looking forward to this because I thought this was going to be a good sequence. And even, you know, it started off okay, but it was just a bit anti-climatic. You know, again, they kind of fight for about 30 seconds to a minute. We cut away and then we come back, and then Seven of Nine just defeats her easily and just kicks her down the kind of over the edge of the, and again this was kind of like, it was just really again just anticlimactic because you're thinking, why bring Narisa back? You could have actually had this scene 2 episodes right ago when Seven of Nine was initially trying to take over the Borg, and Narisa was, she set the kind of release switch to send all the Borgs into space. You could have had Narisa fight Seven of Nine back then, and actually would have been a much more of a tense moment because we were in the kind of sequence of Seven of Nine trying to reclaim the Borg cube as they were trying to release it, and then we knew the remaining fleets were coming. So it would have been much better served if you'd have had it where this fight sequence happened back then. But kind of now it just didn't really feel that important, and it was just, you know, she just beats her quickly, kicks her off the edge, and you're like, oh, okay. So Narisa, who really, you know, whilst obviously great to look at, really hasn't been, as if they haven't really built on the substance of that character. You know, she's always had this seemingly incestual relationship with Narek, you know, brother and sisters, bit really uncomfortable watching on there, but that's it really. But there was no really depth to her. You know, they've had opportunities to really give her more substance, but they just thrown it away. So again, she dies, and you're kind of okay, whatever, move on to the next spot on here. So we then see again the Romulan fleet of ships approaching the planet, and then we get this kind of large assault now of all the space orchids. If you remember from the previous episode, the space orchids were used to stop the original spaceship for the heroes infiltrating the planet. So now that they know the Romulan fleet is coming, they send this huge swarm of orchids all over the place. And this is where the kind of aesthetic of the show reminded me a lot of Discovery. You know, if you go through both finales, particularly the season 2 finale, right, where we have all these space battles and it's just huge array of ships and effects and pixels and CGI pixels going all over the place. And yeah, it did kind of resemble more of a computer game, if you like, because it's hard to see what's kind of going on. You've got all these space orchids all over the place, just taking up the whole screen, and you never really get a sense of perspective and who's shooting who and how they're maneuvering between each kind of part of space. So yeah, it just came a bit muddled. Some shots were visually good to look at, but again, it's just overload, isn't it? And lens flare is everywhere and lasers are popping up everywhere, and again, it's just that it's overdone, it's too much, right? If you go back to the original movies, what made them so good is that you could actually see the spaceships and where they were traveling, and there was this huge kind of suspense and build up as we got within the space battles, right? But here it's just too much, too many moving parts, too many effects, and again it just takes you a bit out of it. So we just keep going on there, and then there was this really weird bit where the Doctor kind of has this device where they can create holographic images of things. Again, again, unless I missed something throughout the previous season, it just came out of nowhere. I just thought, okay, you've got this device on there, you can generate holograms. She does this weird thing when she generates it, and you see her multiple faces on there. And Picard is having a bit of trouble himself because he's trying to fly the ship, and this is only, I think, the second time I believe in this season he's tried to maneuver it. So yeah, that was a bit unconvincing how he's using all the kind of holographic buttons and he's moving all over the place. You never associate really admiral or captain as the person who can pilot the ship. Maybe I'm nitpicking a bit here, but I think that was just their way just to keep Picard involved, more in the events on there. So yeah, this whole thing with the holographic images, so they use it to replicate thousands or hundreds of thousands of the ships that they're in. So the Romulans are shooting out as kind of a diversionary tactic on there. Okay, and then out of nowhere, and this is again another criticism, out of nowhere, like Riker shows up with just a massive just fleet. Just there must have been like 1,000 ships of Starfleet. Just pops up out of nowhere. They just pop out of warp drive. It's literally like they're just teleporting, boom, 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 and you see this massive shot of just the Starfleet ship just completely taking over the whole screen. And again, it's one of those where it lacks any tension or suspense. They just happens. Like what you'd want to do is have maybe I'm sensing an energy signature, right? And maybe it's the super simps finally coming over, or maybe it's more Romulan ships coming through, right? Because at the time they had no idea that Riker was coming with these fleets. So you would build that tension up, and then at the last moment, oh, it's not an enemy, it's a hero, or it's someone to help us. Boom, and then it's Riker, right? But no, it just happens. They just literally just come out of nowhere. And again, you're questioning, as we saw in previous episodes, Riker was kind of retired, right? He didn't want to get involved in it anymore. He could have helped Jean-Luc in the task, but he didn't. He was just happy in his home, his shielded planet with Deanna Troi and their daughter, right? But now he's back as a captain or admiral. He got the SOS. Did Picard send the SOS? Again, commit me in the comments. I don't remember Picard sending the SOS. Probably did, but I kind of missed it, I guess. And he's managed to convince Starfleet to collate this whole armada to come over there and fight the fight, right? They wouldn't listen to Picard, right? But they listened to Riker, right? Picard is every bit as established, even more established, you'd seem, than Riker is, right? But they wouldn't listen to Picard, but they'll listen to Riker, and he's just been able to assume this whole armada of ships just out of nowhere, right? I will admit, Riker he looked the part, didn't he? Jonathan Frakes, Riker, when he's standing there in the middle there and he's got the bridge on there, he looks convincing. And actually, this is one of the better parts of the episode, and it actually got me convinced that I wouldn't mind actually seeing a standoff series with Riker, right? Because he's got that, even though he's older, he's still got that youthful or commanding enough presence about him where, yeah, I could envisage a series of Riker going about having these adventures. He's still got that, that statement presence about him, and he looks good in the role. The only thing I didn't like was the bridge design. It's typical with the kind of same design of Discovery, but it's really got this really cold and dry kind of feel to it. It feels more like a factory or warehouse when Riker was looking at the screen, and there was no one really in front of him, and it seemed really empty. There was like really 2 or 3 people behind him as far as I could see, and you for to lead such a big assault on this, you'd want the bridge to kind of be more active, people activating buttons and screens all over the place, really kind of get this busy activity behind Riker as if he's commanding this big assault. But he almost looks like he was on there on his own, just leading the ship, and it had this red kind of carbon like design on it. It didn't look very appealing to me on there, but that's just a big criticism. So again, just Riker just popping out of nowhere again, just kind of had this what they call Deus Ex Machina filter barrels. It no build up, no tension, no suspense, just pops out over there. So we go on to the next part. Picard is back on the ship, and he's now just suffering now from, we know, the ongoing brain anomaly that he's had, that was established way back in I think the first episode or two. We know he's been suffering from, and obviously the current events are taking its toll, and he's beginning to kind of succumb to it all, and he kind of makes a last ditch attempt to connect with Soji Communications and make this kind of big speech to her. And as we see that, Soji's now activated the beacon, and we get the portal open, and it really, you had this red kind of circle vortex opening, and when I saw this, it really reminded me of the Transformers movies, right? I think it's Dark of the Moon. It could be any Transformers movie, to be honest. But the same kind of portal, if you like, the textured portal, and as it opens, you get this smoky entrance. Then you kind of get these machines coming through these tentacles. It was weird. It was more like, it reminded me of two things. If you go back to Transformers Dark of the Moon, you get that kind of skyscraper sequence with the tentacles taking over the building, and also if you remember Matrix Revolutions, you had the Sentinel attack, and kind of these octopus like metallic tentacles. And again, that was a bit weird. This super synth being, is that what they mean? Is that what they are? I thought they were more of a species, right, rather than what, this big monster. Was it one ship? Was it loads of ships? These tentacle like monsters, how many of them were there? It's kind of just feeding out of this circle. It's just really weird. I just think it was the wrong approach of all the kind of different takes they could have done to have this kind of manifestation of this superior force coming through to try and take anybody. I think this was the wrong way to do it. Yeah, when I watched it did just remind me a lot of the Transformers movies, but okay, fair enough, we go on there. And then we get to another bit that I had a problem with as well, just this whole thing where Picard, and we all know a signature kind of characteristic of him, that he is more this idealistic kind of character. He believes in unifying people together. He believes more in the principles, and he makes these big speeches, to kind of bring people together, right? And this is the problem I have, because you've had the Romulans. They've been on this seemingly century quest to stop the Simps. Commander Ho has been assuming this undercover identity as a Starfleet, officer, and she's been building up this kind of operation to take out all these synthetic beings, right? We go back to the legend I've mentioned before, and this is a really critical case to defeat all the Simps, and then the Simps realise, no, we're really determined now to defeat the all organic life, right? So they've got these pretty, if you like, strong motivations, okay? And then Picard makes his speech to Soji, and then everybody else can listen to it on the comms, and within 2 minutes they stop. They just stop. So all this fighting they've done and planning they've done and getting all the fleets together to defeat this enemy on both sides, all it's taken is Picard to do this 2 minute speech for them to stop. Right? They didn't listen to Picard before, either in the previous episode. The Simps didn't listen to him, and then beforehand, when Picard went to the Starfleet, and he had the kind of foul mouth kind of admiral officer, the old woman on there, she didn't listen to him before, and they didn't listen to him back then. But all he does is this 2 minute speech, you make a choice and you can decide, blah blah blah, and then they just stop. Everybody just stops. This whole kind of setup of this big conflict, this big battle we're supposedly going to get, just stops, just cancels, just like that, out of nowhere, because of one person making their speech, right? And particularly I had a problem with Commander O, right? Because we've seen what level she's prepared to go to. Remember, she put the Doctor as a kind of mole, didn't she, to infiltrate Picard in a whole operation on that, right? So she's just going to stop all those years and years and years of going on this big quest. But no, Picard says 2 minute speech and that's it, done, finish. And it just, again, just anticlimactic. It just never convinced me, and everything comes to a halt. So Soji stops the beacon, the big tentacle monster thingy goes back in its little portal, and Commander O decides to stop. Riker then decides to stop. And what was funny was that, basically you've known that Commander O has kind of been this kind of undercover secretive agent working within Starfleet. Right? You don't know how many people she's kind of got under her control within Starfleet, right? But no, Riker will just let her go. He won't even try to apprehend her or arrest her, for any potential crimes she's committed within Starfleet, right? You're just going to let her go. She kind of says, oh, we don't need escorting outfit. Oh, I think you do. But even that didn't make sense because they just fly off and then Riker hangs about for 1 minute and then he flies off with his armada as well. So you've got these two massive fleets, yeah, about to battle each other, and at the end they just stop and then just fly off, and it just wasn't convincing. It just never rung true. You're telling me you're just going to let Commander O go after doing all that with the Romulans, right? And it was almost like, this episode they felt like, now we're coming to the final part of this episode. We just need to wrap everything up. We won't kind of follow it through because really what you should have had is a large scale battle. I know some people, they don't like it sometimes, when you have the finale and the typical space battles, typically what he did in Discovery. But this story arc merited or warranted rather a battle between the Federation and the Romulans, because again we know what lengths they've gone to, Commando has gone to fulfill this quest. So there's no, you'd think she'd rather go down fighting rather than just stopping all of a sudden because of Picard. Right now, this might have worked if maybe they captured Picard and we get some sort of dialogue scenes between Commander O and Picard, and we get a better understanding of each other's personalities, and maybe Picard was somehow able to reach on some sort of level to Commander O beforehand, which would make her maybe relent her plans later on. You could have had that, but they didn't do that. So again, that was just unconvinced to me, the way the whole battle just came to a halt and everybody just walked away, and we're back now, everybody's happy and everything's just resolved just like that. Right? So we go on to the last bit now, and Picard has finally succumbed to his brain condition. He goes into this seemingly dream state, and we come to really, I think, was probably the best scene of this episode, right? Where he meets Data and they have this, it's quite a lengthy conversation, and they're talking about how Picard has died now, and he keeps referring back to Data that he's had in this kind of simulation. Again, maybe I was just tuning out at this point, but I just didn't get this whole Data being alive or existing. Was it in Picard's consciousness? Is that right? So he was in Picard's consciousness in his brain on here, and that was kind of holding Picard back, and it was kind of keeping Data alive, if you like, in his mind. Data's kind of consciousness was stuck in Picard's consciousness. I just didn't get the whole concept of what they were trying to do. But basically, Data, after a lengthy conversation, just saying, I want to be let go now. I want to try. I don't want to live forever or infinitely. I want to learn what death is like so I can live a final moment as a normal human being. Again, I wasn't really convinced by that, but okay, fair enough. They had to let Data go at some point, and again, I can understand this was kind of like a full cycle moment to what we got at the beginning of the season, right? Which was a scene between Picard and Data where they're on the ship playing chess. So, okay, I can respect this because this is kind of like a summarization of what they deemed this to be about. This began with Picard's relationship with Data and the fact that Data sacrificed life, if you remember, in the Star Trek Nemesis. Spoilers if you haven't. Basically, that resulted in Data giving up his life so Picard could live, right? So this was kind of like a full round moment on here. So it turns out that Picard wasn't actually dead, or he was dead, but they managed to basically retain his brain neurons or his brain energy, and they were able to transport it to another synth-like body, right? So essentially Picard has died, and essentially they've put him into kind of like another body, if you like. So Picard is kind of like, now he's not really Picard, he's a synth basically, isn't he? He is a synthetic body now. Okay, he's retained his consciousness, but he's basically in another body. And he comes out, and as we see, when he wakes up and everybody's talking, they didn't give him, if you like, any extra strength or any extra abilities. They managed to eliminate their brain anomaly, and he's just back on there as normally is. They put him in, I think it was a 94-year-old body or 97-year-old body, and you'd think to yourself, well, why not surely give him a young body, right? Because as we get older, that's what we want, to be able to relive our lives. And I thought, you'd surely want to give him a younger body, because you think someone with Picard's wisdom and his experience and his knowledge, and if you put him in like a 25-year-old body, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with, right? So understandably so, because it's Patrick Stewart and they've got to keep him around for season 2. Okay, we understand that, but really logically, you'd want the wisdom and the knowledge and the youth, and you fuse those together, and then you've got, an awesome leader or an awesome captain to begin with. But no, they give him the old body on there, and even he remarks, I would have liked maybe another 10 or 20 years off that, but okay, fair enough. And then they come to this bit now where they disconnect data, and again, I didn't understand this, because I thought, if they can transport the brain energy of Picard, why can't they just transport the brain energy of Data? Maybe Data wanted to be let go, but Picard could have saved Data, and they could have just kept Data around, right, for him to experience new life, new adventures. But fair enough. And then we have this when they're disconnecting Data, but they're pulling out all these USB sticks. They stop the record playing, and they stop. Again, I didn't really get the concept of, if we're outside now, how can we disconnect Data by USB sticks? So the memory of Data's consciousness was in that device the whole time. I just didn't get it. At this point, I was like, whatever. They're just trying to disconnect and basically just bring an end to the whole Data arc with Picard. That's what they're doing. So I just accepted that. I wasn't really fussed about how they were doing it and the mechanics of it by now. It was just, they were just doing it here. So that was the end of the Data arc, and then we see at the end everybody's coming back together. We have Rios and Seven of Nine together. I thought they were initially having, trying to begin some sort of romantic subplot between them, but then we later on see that I think they're trying to keep the Doctor and Rios. That's going to be the kind of relationship on there. We had this weird scene as well where we see Raffi and Seven of Nine holding hands, and it's quite a firm like holding of hands, indicating that their relationship, again, another plot point, come out of nowhere. We've had no indication from Raffi or Seven of Nine that they're kind of lesbian characters. There's been no indication throughout this whole season of that, and then all of a sudden they're just really holding hands together like that. You get the feeling, again, that was this part of a reshoot. I know there's been ongoing reshoots and they've had to rejig a couple of episodes. If you go online, you'll see more background information on that. Maybe that was one of it. Maybe throughout the season before, there were a couple of scenes when Raffi and Seven of Nine had maybe an emotional moment together. Maybe that got edited out, and then this was kind of fed in here. But again, just even though they didn't full on kiss, and who knows, they might have had a very emotional scene, a bit like what Rios and Seven of Nine had before, and they were just embracing each other and holding hands. Fair enough, you can interpret as you will, but it just gave that indication, they're kind of beginning a relationship. It doesn't matter if they are going to begin a relationship, it doesn't matter as such, but it's just, again, just thrown out of nowhere. And I think as a viewer, if you're going to have things like that, you want it to have a build up, right? You want it to have a kind of logic to it and a follow through to it. So a couple meets up here, they argue here, they have an emotional moment here, then they end up together later on here, right? It was a bit like the same with the Doctor and the Rios, right? Again, she killed Maddox, she was in an emotional state, and then all of a sudden she's just with Rios. Again, just out of nowhere. A lot of times throughout this episode, and maybe throughout the season itself, just moments, developments, relationships just happening out of nowhere. Just no kind of build up or reason to him. So that was a bit weird overall. So again, the crew are going to stay together and have further adventures. That's the final shot. Again, they have to keep them together for season 2. I understand that. You could nitpick and say again, well, why do they need to stay together? Raffi could surely want to go back to, was it I can't remember, Freeland, or whether the planet was, to go back and maybe reunite again with her son. Rios can do whatever he needs to do. He's fulfilled his mission now on there. Elnor, you would have thought, would want to go back to his home planet. He's fulfilled his task. He's protected Picard, right? So you'd go back to his home planet. So Seven of Nine, again, you can maybe keep her around. She's kind of fulfilled. She got revenge with the people that killed her partner. So maybe you could have kept her around. So again, you could nitpick as to why they're staying together, but fair enough, they're on there. So yeah, overall, just a very chaotic, hectic episode. Lots of action, special effects, epic moments. They try to go through dramatic, emotional moments, but not a lot of them landed. And again, when you're rattling on at such a pace, it's very hard to keep up with all. It's very hard to keep invested in it all. And I think it just highlighted a lot of the issues in this season, and particularly as well what we saw in Star Trek Discovery. It's very similar, the way the editing and the aesthetic and the filmmaking, it's very similar, the kind of same issues on here. I'm adamant, and this is going to be, I'm in a minority here, but I still think Star Trek Discovery is a better show than this. I'll talk about that more in the season review of Picard, because I've gone on long enough now. But I think there was just more to Discovery, and the characters were better and the story arcs were better. I was more invested to a degree in Discovery than what I was in Picard. So there's my very lengthy review of Star Trek Picard season finale. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you like this episode? Did you not like this episode? Do you think it's a better show than Star Trek Discovery? Or do you think there's a lot of work to be done? I know there's a lot of kind of divisive feelings and opinions with Star Trek Picard, amongst fans and critics alike on here. So are you divided as well? Or do you think this was a good series? Did you enjoy Star Trek Picard and felt it was an improvement over Star Trek Discovery, and are looking forward to season 2, which has already been announced on here? So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and stay safe, wash your hands, keep safe distances, take care. For now, I will do a season review Picard later on, and that's it for right now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.